This is New York City's biggest environmental work in progress.
10 city blocks,
Facing the challenge of rising sea levels, the East Side Coastal Resiliency Project is lifting the waterfront and erecting a 10-foot wall deep-rooted in steel. Basically, when the water rises, it's supposed to stop it.
Correct. The water will rise, and as high as it gets, it's going to stop. It's not going to make it to the other side, so it protects the residents and the buildings on the other side.
With a wall, elevated parkland and movable floodgates, this $1.45 billion project will one day extend from East 25th Street to all the way downtown on Montgomery Street. For now, however, the section under construction only covers 10 city blocks. 9 years after Hurricane Sandy claimed the lives of 44 New Yorkers, work continues all over the city. Like these jetties in the Rockaways in Queens, meant to protect and increase the size of the beach in an area increasingly vulnerable to rising sea levels. Another superstorm is not going to have consequences as dire as we saw with Sandy.
That's right. These layers of protection will basically serve as a buffer for the storm surge and will minimize and mitigate the impacts to the community behind it.
Janie Baveshi is director of the Mayor's Office of Climate Resiliency. She thinks New York City has become a global leader in climate adaptation under Bill de Blasio.
It's because of the mayor's leadership combined with the fact that we have real resources to do climate adaptation work, and we have such an aware constituency that's really demanding climate action that we've been able to get as far as we have. And we're a global leader in climate adaptation.
But not everybody agrees. On August 31st, the remnants of Hurricane Ida caught city officials by surprise. Record rainfall with an intensity of 3 inches in 1 hour brought massive flooding and killed 16 New Yorkers, many in basement apartments. The city's adaptation efforts proved insufficient.
The threat is not just in the shoreline. That's how we defined it after Sandy. But now we see the threat is to the whole city. It doesn't matter. You can be in Morningside Heights or Washington Heights, way up high. The rain comes down just as fast there as down on the Bowery.
4 weeks after Ida,
it's called the new normal.
De Blasio released a report with plans on how to face a similar storm in the future.
The challenge that we face is just that we live in an incredibly dense urban environment with a lot of pavement. And so our goal is to try to create more spaces to store stormwater and for the rainwater to go, because we're never going to be able to build big enough sewers to capture the kind of rainfall we saw during Ida.
One of these spaces is this artificial pond in Midland Beach on Staten Island, built on a stretch of land bought by the city. Once completed, this so-called Blue Belt will drain and contain stormwater of the 3 surrounding neighborhoods in order to avoid flooding.
It's going back to what was here before the city was settled. There were a lot of these natural ponds and streams that helped to drain the area, and we're really just restoring that.
When Sandy hit,
Mayor de Blasio took office 14 months after Sandy. His predecessor, Michael Bloomberg, left a $20 billion blueprint filled with infrastructure plans to fortify the city. 8 years later, some of those projects are just getting started. Daniel Zarilli worked under both mayors as director of resiliency.
In 2013, we launched a $20 billion adaptation program, and you can see the manifestation of that all across the city in housing elevations and hospitals and public housing and a range of investments that have been made. It also means that we've upgraded our building codes and our zoning codes and things that you can't necessarily see but are helping make us safer.
One of those upgrades is here at the Coney Island houses, where the old basement boilers were flooded during Sandy. The brand new ones in this public housing complex are built to withstand future challenges.
These boilers have been installed well above the flood elevation for this location so that in any future storm, they'll be protected and they'll be able to provide heat and hot water for the residents.
As part of the Sandy recovery program, 20 public housing campuses received new protected heat and water systems. And now the city's housing authority is incorporating the strategy in its construction projects.
designing infrastructure and especially the distribution systems that go along with it does take a lot of time. And those construction projects can stretch over years because all of the buildings we're working in are occupied.
But some experts believe New York City is hardly keeping up with the climate threat, and they see de Blasio's tenure as a missed opportunity.
I think there's been a lot of discussion and planning. I think we've had a complete failure of mayoral leadership.
The East Side Coastal Resiliency Project started construction 4 years late. And work at the section at East River Park has been stopped by a lawsuit brought by community organizations unhappy with how the park will be affected. A seawall for Staten Island's East Shore has also been mired in delays.
But I do know this is a good project.
You have to be willing to accept the fact that not everybody's going to love everything you do. And if your main objective as mayor is political popularity and maybe running for president or for governor or whatever the next thing is, it doesn't suit you well for the tough choices you're going to have to make to be the mayor of a place as complicated as New York. And that's essentially what we've had.
Climate justice activists like Elizabeth Jean-Pierre also criticize the mayor's approach, giving him only a passing grade.
I would give him a C. I think that he had an opportunity to take the momentum that existed under the Bloomberg administration and amp that up. And what we saw was a level of passivity that was inconsistent with what we were learning about climate change.
And it's not only when it comes to climate adaptation.
We have to think about our efforts to address climate change locally.
Despite de Blasio's pledges, the latest data available show greenhouse emissions are up from 2017 levels.
I think that Mayor de Blasio needed to really prioritize fighting climate change and really making sure that we were taking actions and not just talking about it when it was convenient.
The recent closure of the Indian Point nuclear plant in Westchester County might also increase emissions further in the short term, making the city more reliant on natural gas to close the gap.
New York City has often been a leader on the environment and on climate change. We need to be front and center. Whatever happens at the national level, we need New York City to be advancing change and being real leaders on this. And I don't think we've had enough of that over the last 8 years.
Critics do acknowledge the future positive impact of Local Law 97. Signed by de Blasio in 2019, it will mandate retrofitting of big buildings in order to reduce greenhouse emissions by 40% by 2030 and by 80% by 2050.
Emissions reduction.
This would be de Blasio's top climate legacy item, according to Zarilli.
The second is going to be our work to divest our pension funds, remove billions of dollars from the fossil fuel industry, and redirect those funds into billions of dollars of new clean energy investment.
That move was finally announced early this year.
This will be the largest fossil fuel divestment in the nation.
It's estimated to amount to $4 billion. After years of talking about it, it's now that New York and other cities are finally taking some action and slowly divesting their pension funds from fossil fuel companies. In its goal to reduce emissions, New York also needs cooperation from key players like Con Edison, which delivers power to millions of New Yorkers. Its president, Tim Cawley, recently announced an ambitious timeline that includes delivering 100% clean power to its customers by 2040. Cawley defends de Blasio's record on mitigation.
He has put a focus on it, I would say. He's one link in a series that will get us there, but I think his focus has helped push the ball forward for New York City and the surrounding area.
For decades, big oil.
It's not only New York that's having a hard time reducing emissions and transitioning to clean energy sources. The international community is generally walking away from its polluting ways very slowly. And when it comes to adaptation, complex infrastructure projects always take a long time to fund, design, negotiate, and get built.
Does more work need to happen? Absolutely. I've always said resiliency is a process, not an outcome, and we will continue to do this work and build on the investments we've made. But there's an enormous amount of work that's underway and plenty to build on for the next administration.